Hello, everyone. You guys are listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We are the #1 internet singles network. We're a talk network. We have shows that talk about everything. And so we hope that you'll join us each and every day on our live streaming radio station that we have, or go to our website right there on goingsolomedia.com. All of our shows are pretty much there. Our YouTube channel, we have everything there, so you can find us there. But let's go on with the show because I want to make sure you guys get the most of it. So those of you that don't know me, I am Cece Schatz. I'm the doyenne of relationship building. I am also the founder and organizer of our wonderful station here, WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, and the Going Solo Network, our whole community that we have. So I want to make sure you know what show you're on because I'm on various different shows. We're on the Author's Corner, Meet the Author, and today we have a wonderful guest with us. Let's bring her right on up so you guys can see her in person. We have a beautiful guest. Her name is Judi Miller. She's a coach, speaker, and author. And her website right there, if you guys want to jot it down real quick, it's judymiller.net. That's Judi. So we have an I there. Miller, MILLER.net. She has written this wonderful book. It's called Perfect, A Patch to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. It's a life-changing book that illustrates the awesome, the awe-inspiring and miraculously way that the universe orchestrates our lives towards a state of, let's see, get the rate of it. So the state of wholeness, completion, and love, whatever we are aware of, it or not. You know what? You guys need to rush over to her website and claim the 5 free bonuses. And so just go to judymiller.net and order your copy. So now don't do it yet because we want to make sure we keep on with the show here. So let's talk a little bit with Judi. So welcome to the show, Judi.
Cece, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is nice having you. You know, I thought your book was very interesting because I believe our listeners they really go through all of this. They all want love in their lives. They all are struggling with forgiveness, not only of other people, but with themselves. And there's a huge amount of transformation that's taking place within our lives, both, you know, I think within the realms of what's happening today, but also personally, you know, because with the virus and everything, there's so much transformation that's happening. It's awakening us to what's happening. But let's talk a little bit about your book because I find it very fascinating that it really drives home a path to love, forgiveness, and transformation. So you were, and I think you still are probably, you're like a certified chartered accountant or a CPA, am I correct?
Correct.
So this was your field of work. This is something that you probably really enjoy doing, and you're really probably very successful in your own right with regards to that profession. But then what drove you to actually write a book that is inspiring and changing lives? What happened in your life that made you think, you know what, I want to give to other people and let them be aware of this?
Cece, that's a fantastic question. If I could just start with 3 questions of my own for you and your listeners. So, have you ever felt different, like you didn't belong?
Yeah.
Or maybe you felt incomplete, maybe searching for someone or something to make you feel whole.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe if you were like me, you felt unworthy, always having to prove yourself over and over again.
Very true. I think all of us have felt that at some time in our lives, for sure.
Yeah. And the reason I ask you these questions and your listeners these questions is because these feelings have literally plagued me for most of my life. You know, as you mentioned, I started my career as a CPA. Then I went to work in finance in the healthcare industry for over 25 years. But on this journey that I took over the past several years, I learned how to let go of those feelings that no longer served me. And as I look out into the world, I see so many people who suffer from the same feelings that I did. And my wish is really just to share it with them.
So that's beautiful. And I'm so glad that you're doing that because I really do feel those 3 questions that you asked us is really earth-shattering because I think a lot of people do feel those things. They're looking for something in their lives. They're looking for a purpose in their lives. So share with us a little bit your journey as you started to kind of open up to this possibility.
Sure. So I'd love to jump into it, but right before I get into it, people ask me what the book is about. And like you said, the subtitle to the book is A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. But there are so many different definitions of forgiveness. So before we jump into my story, I just wanted to share with you what my definition of forgiveness is. For me,
Mhm.
it's really, really simple. It means to forgo or to let go of. So painful and unwanted events are going to happen to all of us. We could either experience that event once, or we could play it over and over again, literally hundreds, even thousands of times until it becomes stuck. It becomes our identity. So for me, forgiveness means to just forego or to let go of those contracted negative stories that no longer serve us. And I do believe it's a gift that we give ourselves. It's an act of self-love. So
For sure. And people struggle with that, don't they? The
yeah,
forgiveness part of it. And when they look at forgiveness, they're always thinking they're forgiving someone else, but it's really the act of forgiving yourself, being able to move forward in your life.
exactly, exactly. So forgiveness is not about condoning the actions of another person. It's getting you out of that cycle of victimhood so you can experience true and ultimate freedom.
Mhm.
So I'd love to give you a 5-minute overview of the book, and then we could
Yeah,
go into
please.
detail.
Would
So,
love that.
so like many people, I had fears as a child. I was actually afraid of drowning, but I was terrified of the night. And if you've never felt what terror feels like, the closest thing that I can do to explain it is if someone jumps out in front of you unexpectedly, your heart begins to race. You start to sweat, your sensors are on full alert, and maybe you can't even breathe. So for most people, those sensations last maybe a few seconds, but for some people like myself, it could literally last much longer. So as a child, I was terrified of the night, and I literally could feel and sense different energies around me, and I didn't know if they were there to help me or to harm me. So night after night, I would crawl into bed, literally pull the covers over my head and recite the Lord's Prayer over and over again until ultimately exhausted, I would fall asleep. And this was my ritual night after night. And this continued well into my 20s. So, as we mentioned, I started my career as a CPA. So, here I was going to work during the day, and then at night, crawling back into bed, terrified of what I couldn't explain. I actually met my husband at work. We got married and we had kids. And in the exhaustion of raising two incredible children, commuting 3 hours a day to work and working 40 to 50 hours a week, everything stopped. In the exhaustion, everything stopped. The terror, the energies, the subtle whispers. But then my kids grew up and they went off to college and the house became silent. And many of you may know what that silence feels like. Anyone who's an empty nester. And in the silence, everything returned. The terror, the energies, the subtle whispers. I would literally tiptoe around my house, afraid of what I might encounter. Um, People ask me what that felt like. It literally felt like someone was always standing beside me. There were eyes looking at me from across the room. I would wake up in terror at night, clutching at my husband, and soon we both began to lose sleep. Now, around the same time, I actually started to bleed uncontrollably month after month, and I went to see my doctor. And my doctor said that I needed to have a hysterectomy. And I was terrified of this surgery. And I couldn't understand why. I had worked in the healthcare industry for over 25 years, and I trust modern medicine implicitly. But it felt like the same terror that I had as a child and the same terror that returned to me as an adult. So a very good friend of mine recommended that I read a book called Light Emerging by Barbara Brennan. And Barbara was a former NASA physicist, and she actually studied the human energy field. And what she learned, she was actually able to heal. She was actually able to heal people with her hands. So literally days before my surgery, I found myself Googling on the internet, healers near me. And as I sat across from my healer for that very first time, I literally felt like my entire life was locking into place. And at the time, I didn't know the role that that healer would actually play in my family's history. So after my surgery, my healer helped me heal from my hysterectomy. And then in the following months, we began to explore this terror that I felt at night. We started talking about my childhood. Was there anything from my childhood that actually elicited this panic and this fear every night? And nothing came to light. And then she introduced me to something that I absolutely had never heard of before. She introduced me to past lives. She introduced me to the amazing work of Dr. Brian Weiss. Dr. Weiss was a prominent psychiatrist. He studied at Columbia, he studied at Yale, and he was very reputable. And he had a client called Catherine. And Catherine had these unexplainable fears and phobias in her own life. And through hypnosis, they accidentally discovered that the fear and the trauma that she experienced in this lifetime was actually attributable to something in her past lives, and they were able to heal. So my healer and I talked about this. We also talked about my parents, things that we inherit from our parents. We know that we inherit physical characteristics from our parents, the color of our hair, the color of our eyes, the shape of our nose. But we also started to talk about the science of epigenetics. And the science of epigenetics says that we could actually inherit the pain and the trauma from our parents and our ancestors. So what we uncovered in this journey was that pain and that terror that I felt every night wasn't actually my own. It was actually a cellular memory from my mother. And I know that might sound a little strange. They say that every female baby is actually born with 2 to 3 million of their reproductive eggs at birth. So on a cellular level, the triumphs as well as the traumas that especially our mothers experienced as a child, on a cellular level, we were actually there. But I have to tell you, my story actually doesn't end there. It's actually a shocking past life connection to that very healer that I trusted to heal me in this lifetime. In a previous lifetime, she was the ancestral soul of the person who inflicted the pain on my family. And in that moment of revelation, I could have felt fear, betrayal, anger, but I didn't. All I felt was the immense love and perfection of the universe. I actually saw how all of our souls are interconnected across lifetimes, how we're unconditionally loved, and how we can heal in any moment in this lifetime or in any other. So that's actually where the name Perfect came from the book. And my story is all about helping people to learn to release their own stories. So again, in that moment of revelation, I could have felt fear, betrayal, or anger. I could have created a story that would haunt me for the rest of my life, but I didn't. Instead, I chose to see the miracle in the situation. So the book is actually broken up into 3 parts. 80 to 90% of it is actually the story. It's written like a novel, so you can go along and experience the journey with me. But there's a handful of pages, which I call reflections, that teach people how to let go of their own stories. And then there are a handful of very simple exercises, and I made them purposely simple because I know how crazy life can be. So you could embody those lessons into your life. So Perfect is all about letting go of the stories that no longer serve us.
Well, that's a very fascinating story. And I think really, a lot of people do experience exactly what you've experienced with regards to the feelings that they felt, not really understanding why they're feeling these feelings, and then going back in their past lives or in their, when their childhood and things like that, to be able to try to sort some of those issues out. I think it's very important that we do get in touch with, our true core, and that's certainly what you've done to create a path. So let me ask you a little bit here about, what is your opinion? What is our greatest superpower?
That's a great question. Between stimulus and response, there's a gap. And in that gap, we get to decide. We get to decide whether or not we truly feel emotions as sensations and then let them go. I believe emotions are meant to be felt and not created as stories in our head. And in that gap, we also get the opportunity to decide whether or not we come from a place of love or from a place of fear. So I believe fear is just a contracted negative energy. And when you let go of the fear, there's only love. So our greatest superpower is the power to decide in any given moment how we're going to react.
Yeah, so what beautifully said, beautifully said. So let's talk a little bit about these stories. We have some questions here, and you say that we all create stories that become our identities. And what are some of the stories that you've created in your own life, other than what you've shared with us here? And then I'm also thinking about, how can you disrupt those stories? So if we're generating some sort of negative stories within our lives, how can we disrupt that? So do you have any other particular stories that has happened within your life?
Sure. So for most of my life, I felt different. I was actually born in Trinidad, which is an island in the Caribbean, right off the coast of South America. And I moved to the US when I was very young. And I didn't fit in. I looked different than other people in my neighborhood. It's not about race or discrimination. I just looked different. I was also born with 11 fingers, and I also had this unexplainable terror and fear of the night. So I always felt different. I also had problems actually expressing myself. I couldn't find my voice. Whenever somebody asked me a question, I would literally freeze. And then the third story that I had created around my life was that I was incomplete. I was always searching for someone or something to make me feel whole, when in reality, we are already whole and complete. We were already perfect the way that we are. So those were the stories that I carried for most of my life. But as you mentioned and asked, how do you let go of those stories? So I actually have an acronym. I call it NEST, and it just helps me to remember the steps. So the first one, the N, stands for notice, become aware of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. So you asked me what my superpower is, or our superpower is, and I said it's the gap, the space between stimulus and response. So when an event happens, either good or bad, just notice it. Becoming aware of your stories is the first step to disrupting them. Just to give you an example, we have over 60,000 thoughts a day. 95% of them are the same stories you had yesterday and the day before. And 80% of them are quite negative. We're actually, as humans, hardwired to notice and to remember the negative aspects of a situation. And millions of years ago, when we were cavemen and cavewomen, it served us. It was important for our survival. But we no longer live in that reality. So we need to retrain our minds and ourselves to let go of those negative stories that come so easily for us. So again, the awareness and observation and noticing it is the first step. So Cece, I can go on as well. So the E.
I find this so fascinating. I mean, I just like to go with it because I'm truly very interested in this. And I know that we have like these, like when you say stories, the little voices that happen to us, that we create these negative beings, which, aren't really there. And, but let me ask you though, how do you create a positive story? Because so often these stories that we experience are usually built out of like fear and insecurities and things like that. Like you were saying when you moved, and I will tell you, I have been to Trinidad, and I went to a beauty contest there, and I tell you, they have the most beautiful women in Trinidad. So I mean, it's just amazing. But the thing is, and here you're feeling insecure, and I'm saying to you that there's just beautiful women that have been born in Trinidad. But so how do we take these negative stories that we start creating, in ourselves? It starts like one little thing, and we create this great big story that sometimes we don't even want to go and do things simply because we've created this vision within our heads. So how do we take and shift that and create something that's more positive?
So that's great. We were talking about the N in nest before. So to answer your question, so Emmett Fox actually wrote in 1935 a pamphlet called The 7-Day Mental Diet. He said it probably was the hardest thing that you would ever do in your life, meaning that to not have a negative thought for 7 days will probably be one of the most challenging things you do. But after those 7 days, your life will be totally transformed. And basically, again, this was written in 1935. He says, when a negative thought lands on you or comes into your awareness, it's like an ember that lands on your shirt. So you just need to become aware of it and flick it off so it doesn't become a blaze. So the first thing is, again, to notice it, become aware of it. The second thing is the E in nest, which is to truly experience your emotions. Emotions are meant to be felt in the body, not created as thoughts in our mind. So Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. She was a Harvard neuroscientist that was actually able to heal herself from traumatic brain injury. But what she revealed in the book was that after an event happens, either good or bad, it takes us 90 seconds to actually truly experience that event in our body and our physiology, and then let it go. After those 90 seconds, it's up to us, meaning that did we let it go, or do we create a story? Do we create an empowering story, or do we create a disempowering story? So that's what the E stands for. And then to get to your question, so we are powerful beings. We create the same stories over and over. We play it over and over. I mentioned before that 95% of our thoughts are the same ones we had yesterday and the day before, and 80% of them are negative. So we have our thoughts that play like a record player, and we need to scratch that record so we can't keep playing the same stories over and over again that don't serve us, right? So we need to scratch the record. So you might be wondering, how do we scratch the record? So as soon as that negative thought or that negative awareness comes into you, many of these you might have heard, you could say scratch. I mean, you can say cancel, cancel. You can say cancel, stop. You can replace it with a more empowering story. So that's one way. The second way, many of you know, people put rubber bands on their hands and they snap it, right? So whenever they have that thought, they snap it. And the reason I think it works is because, number one, it disrupts the story, but it gets us out of our minds and back into our bodies where life is truly meant to be experienced. So I believe the truth is in our emotions or in our bodies. Stories and thoughts are not always true. And there's so many examples of that in our lives. And then lastly, the T is self-love and self-care, which I know that you teach. But we often look outside of ourselves for people to complete us. I believe the loneliness and the isolation that we often feel is because we become disconnected from ourselves, the essence of who we truly are, which is love. And especially during these difficult times, I think it's so important for us to take time for self-love and self-care.
That you're so right. And it is true. I think when we feel isolated, it's mainly because we're trying to find something to fill that hole when actually we can do it ourselves when we just find the joy, get the joy back in our lives, things that we truly enjoy doing and playing that positive record in our head. Mm-hmm. It's definitely, I know everybody was always saying they're going crazy during the lockdown or whatever we had here for the virus. I was the busiest, because I had so many things that I had put on the back burner that I wanted to accomplish that I was just zooming. So I was enjoying it, but that's because you do have to be okay with yourself, right? You do have to kind of dig deep and say, whatever it is, it is. I'll share with you a little story too. Is that I'm actually shy, believe it or not. It doesn't seem like it because I do all these really outgoing things. And I've kind of trained myself and kind of got it up, and gotten through and realized it's not so scary as I originally thought. But I was in sales, and one time I had to go into this big room with all these people, and I was supposed to try to talk to them and sell them, on what we were doing. I was doing a recruiter, and I was just dreading it. But I didn't want to let my boss know that I was so insecure about it. So I remember I won't drink and do business at the same time. So I got like ginger ale, so it would look like it was a drink. And that was my crutch. And I just went from person to person and did the thing. And I tell you what, I had the most success because I just didn't allow myself to walk in that step in that fear. I just tried to step through it. And it's amazing what you can do if you want to write your own story. And I love the idea of being able to do that. So it's a blessing to have you on the show. So I think that's just a terrific topic. So.
Cece, can I just share something based on what you were saying also? So, before I got on this show, my heart was racing, my stomach was fluttering, my throat was a little dry. But many people might label those sensations as nervousness. But Cece, those are the same exact sensations I have in my body when I feel excited. So oftentimes the sensations of our life, we determine how we label it. We determine the story that we create around it. So we have more power than we know.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, and I think sharing stories is really good. I remember, when I was little, I used to this is so bad, I'm sure, but people will say, okay, but I used to be afraid to ask my parents for money, right? But so what I did is I had this thing where I would ask my dad for, like, if I needed $1, I'd ask him for $2, because then if he said, oh, well, I'll give you $1, that was enough. So I always did it. I always doubled whatever the amount was that I needed. And so I learned to do that, because then I learned that I wouldn't be disappointed if he did for less, right? So it's like you get into your head and you come up with this way of kind of like negotiating, right? We negotiate with ourselves to be able to move forward and accomplish something that we find uncomfortable. And I remember that used to be uncomfortable for me. But isn't that funny how we do that we do these uncomfortable things, but if we can just get through it, the story changes and it shifts, and
Yeah, absolutely.
it becomes something positive. Well, let me ask you here, how do or why do painful and unwanted events occur? So if we can shift our minds, right? If we can shift our minds into a positive story, how come we still kind of have to go through this pain?
So I would love to share another story with you. So there's two kinds of stories. The stories where we convey information, and I think that's the great way to convey information. But then there's the stories that hold us prisoners. So there's a distinction between the stories. So have you ever heard of Little Soul in the Sun by Neil Donald Walsh?
No.
It's a children's book. So
Okay.
I'm not surprised you haven't heard it, but it just so beautifully describes why painful things happen, right? So in heaven, there's only perfection. So we can't know our perfection unless there's contrast. There cannot be light without darkness. And we come to earth to learn our lessons. And when we get to earth, we forget. We're pretending so hard to be what we're not, we forget. So in this book, Little Soul in the Sun, this little soul wants to experience and learn about forgiveness. And God says, well, everything's perfect here. There's nothing to forgive. And then this angel of light comes forward and says, I will help you. I will do something so atrocious that you will learn how to forgive. You will learn how to love unconditionally. And then the little soul says, why would you do that? And the angel of light says, I will do it because I love you. But remember, when we get to earth, I'll be pretending so hard to be what I'm not, that in the moment that you strike me, please remind me who I am, because I would be pretending so hard to be what I'm not. So sometimes painful and unwanted events happen because it's part of our contract, our soul contract, when we come to earth, the lessons that we are here to learn. Also, sometimes we can't see in that specific situation how all of the experiences of our life fit together to tell a much richer and grander story. So many people that I talk to, they say in that moment that they're going through that feels so painful and unwanted, when they take a step back in years following, you ask them if they would go through that experience again. And oftentimes they say they would, because through that adversity, they actually grew stronger. They became a different, more empowered person. So sometimes I believe that's why painful and unwanted events happen. But again, we could experience it once, or we could experience it over and over. And it's the stories that we tell, that we hold on to, that make us experience it over and over again.
Wow, that is very powerful. You know, I've often said that we can take the experiences that we have, whether they be positive or negative, right? And we can learn from those experiences. And then as we continue on with our life, we can recall those, and you know, maybe it might help us with our path. You know, maybe we'll step sideways this time because we know that it's going to be a little bit painful if we go down this road, and makes us aware of things. And often I have said too that, you know, God will open a door for me, but I decide I have to climb through the window instead, because I just got to make my life a little bit more difficult than what it is. But you know, that's the way it is. That's the way it happens sometimes. So let me see here if there's anything that I wanted to make sure that I did. So how has your life changed since your journey, since the journey that you've experienced, and then writing this book? How have things changed for you?
I think my life has totally changed. So because I felt different as a child, I actually felt like I was nothing. But what I discovered is that in the nothingness, when we let go of the stories, the labels, and the judgments, we could be anything that we want. So what I mean by that is, without the stories, labels, and judgments, we could experience through life through the eyes of the Creator, through the eyes of love, where there is no separation. And when you experience life that way, it does truly become miraculous.
That's amazing. Well, we're going to take a quick break because I forgot already about the time, because I'm into this show. So I love it so much. So Judi, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's talk a little bit more about your journey and really what you're doing today and how we can connect with you. So we'll do that. All right.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay, great. You guys are listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. And our website is goingsolomedia.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about Judi Miller and this wonderful book that she's written. And I can't wait to do that. So just a moment of silence so that our affiliates can drop in their commercials. All right. Thank you guys very much for bearing with us on that short, brief commercial. We are WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is the Author's Corner, Meet the Author Show. I'm your host, Cece Schatz, the doyen of relationship building. Our website, if you want more information about us, is goingsolomedia.com. We're going to move right back into our show because I think it's really one of the best shows we have out there because it's truly learning how you can shift your mindset, shift the way you think, shift your stories, create new stories for yourself in a much more positive way. So we have with us today our wonderful guest, Judi Miller. She's a coach, speaker, and author, and her website is judymiller.net, and that's JUDIMILLER.net. And then we're also going to put up all of her contact information so you guys can connect with her on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We want you guys to be able to do that. But welcome back to the show, Judi.
It's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I love so much, not only you, but your book that you wrote. And so let's make sure that we put that up here for everyone so they can see it. And it's a, let's see here. I think I have it down here. You click the right buttons, it works beautifully. So we have the book here. It's Perfect, A Path to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. You can find it on not only her website, which of course we mentioned, which is judymiller.net, but you can also get it on Amazon. But you know what? I would head over to her website and get it there because she's going to throw in, for us, she's going to throw in a wonderful 5 free bonuses. So we want to make sure that you guys capture all of that. We do have a comment here. Let's see. Oh, we got a comment for Johnny. Hey, how you doing there, Johnny? Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate that. So that's great. All right, so let's get on back to what we're talking about here. So we've been talking about understanding your stories, right? Rewriting your stories, being aware of it. You shared with us some great tidbits on being able to be aware of some of the things that we're doing. So let's talk a little bit about what are some practices that we can do to connect with our true selves. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So I mentioned earlier that there's some very simple exercises that I included in the book. And again, they are purposely simple, but I can give you an example of 3 of them. Number 1, we're all energy. Everything in the world is energy. And we've heard this from other people as well. You know, the table is energy. Our thoughts are energy. We could actually see and measure it. But we need to move because we're energy. So for most of my life, when I felt stuck and stagnated in my life, I realized that my energy was stuck. It's so important to move our energy. So that's one very simple exercise. Another one is to create, for we are the creator. We are made of the creative life force of the universe. And if we don't use our creative expression, oftentimes it does manifest as pain and suffering in our bodies. So it doesn't have to be an original work of art. You could sing, you could dance. I play the classical guitar. But what I discovered, it doesn't even have to be that. It doesn't even have to be that complex. It could be the creativity that I put into my presentations for work. It could be how I dress. It could be the creative expression of how I create my food for my family or how I decorate my house. So as a creative life force, we need to create, or it can manifest as pain and sickness. And then the third one, just very simply, as I mentioned before, most of my life I had problems expressing my voice. And Cece, you mentioned that you were shy. So my healer taught me this. She said to sing and open your voice and let your spirit find its voice. Open and let your spirit find its voice. And what I discovered is that singing opens up my throat chakra, but it also opens up my other chakras as well. Music, we know from the Mozart effect, Baroque music can actually instill, a level of quietness and stillness in our bodies. So before important presentations, I used to actually sneak out to the parking lot, put on a song. So I love Let It Be. Let It Be actually opens up all your chakras. So I would be singing away in the parking lot. Then I would go back into my office and give the presentation. So I encourage people to sing. I am tone deaf, so you don't want to hear me sing, but it's just a series of fun, simple exercises that people can do to just get their energy moving. And once you get your energy moving, you will see your life begin to shift.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love that idea of singing. And I'm like you, I'm not very good at it. Although there's something about singing in the car, you think you sound so good when you're singing in the car. I don't know what it is, but it is true. It does tend to release things. It just releases you. And laughter to me is vital.
Yeah,
So I think
absolutely.
sometimes, just being with a friend and talking and laughing and just having a good time, it just opens you up to just being positive. It just shifts your mindset and your being, and also theirs, because when you're with others and you're very positive and happy and enjoying life a little bit, then you can see a change in everybody's, yeah. So I
Absolutely.
like it.
Cece, I'd
Yeah.
love to share another story if there's
Yeah,
time.
I love that. Go ahead.
So remember I said most of my life I felt different. So we know through the law of attraction, what we focus on grows stronger, right? So because I felt different, I attracted a man into my life that was totally different, racially, culturally, and religiously. And for most of my life, my interactions with his family, I always felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like they would never truly love me because I was different. And during this journey that I describe in my book, Perfect, my mother-in-law passed away. And as I was grieving her, and I'm not a medium, but my heart was wide open. And I believe when your heart's open, miracles can happen. I was literally communicating with her. And I saw every interaction with my family go by in a split second. It was almost like a near-death experience, but I wasn't dying. And I saw every interaction with them. And what I got out of that experience and what she taught me was, because I felt different, I made myself different. What we hold is what we reflect. What we hold in our bodies is what's reflected back to us.
Mm-hmm.
So often, that's why the stories are so important. Those stories that we create often reflect back our experiences that we have in life. And that's why they're so important to let go of.
As you're saying that, I was thinking to myself, instead of feeling different, they're like gifts that we don't really quite understand yet, and I think you definitely have a gift. And being young, you don't really always understand what that gift is. And we have another host, a really good friend of mine, who's on the station, Janet, and she often shares about when she was growing up and her gifts that she didn't really quite understand until she got older, and she's a medium. And so, but yeah, it's very fascinating to see that most people, when they do have a gift, and now we're looking at it, we're changing our mind shift, we're shifting the way that we think about individuals that are born with something maybe a little different than us. Instead of it being, different, we're thinking that it is a gift that they're receiving. And we all have gifts, we all have them. And so it's amazing to be able to change the way we think, instead of thinking that there's something wrong with us, than to think that we have something that might be very special that we don't quite know yet what to do with it, like Bewitched, right?
Yes, if we could make our noses move.
That was a pretty good gift, I think that woman had. So, yeah. But it's good to laugh a little bit. Well, let's talk a little bit about here. What is the message you would like our listeners to receive from today's guest appearance?
What if life was one huge interconnected puzzle, each piece perfect and part of the whole? When we see life that way, we begin to let go of the stories that no longer serve us. We see that we are truly perfect. We see that we are loved.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I truly do believe that about being connected, because so often you meet with people that you think, I've met them before, right? Or there's something more about them, or you can understand more about them that they didn't realize that you did, because there's this connection that you have, a special connection you have. And I wonder if it could be a past life, that we might have come across them somewhere in our past. I don't know, but it's a pretty cool thought to think that we are all interconnected. And if we would all think that way, What a wonderful world it would be, because I think we would look at mankind differently, wouldn't we?
We absolutely would.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's an amazing thought. Well, I think your book is very amazing. And so I hope people will go out and get it. I have not read it myself, and I plan on doing that because I think this is going to be a really good book. Now, is it also on audio or not yet? You don't have it on an audio book.
Not yet. I just wanted to make sure that it got out there in book format first, and then I'm focusing on the audio.
Yeah, that would be wonderful to have that on there because everybody's fast paced now. But it's good to sit and be calm and chill out a little bit and read, get in a quiet place and really allow your head to be quiet, I think, to absorb a book like this. So I think it's not one that we want to go fast paced. I think it's one we want to savor a little bit. And now you do have exercises within the book, right?
Yeah, so there's exercises, reflections, but 80 to 90% of it is actually written like a novel. So you want to actually go along on the journey and figure out how everything actually ends. So it was written purposely that way.
That's wonderful. For you being your very first book, now I know you have the ebook that you're going to be giving away. We go on your website and claim that, and we'll share that with the audience here in a second. But for your very first book, this is really quite an undertaking and quite a beautifully presented book. So thank you so much for taking the time to not only just write a book, but also to capture the reader within the pages that you've written, and then also allow them time in which to have space so they can reflect, and then also change their lives a little bit accordingly, because so often it's that learning environment that we take the time, if we take the time, right, that we can really change our lives for the positive. So yeah, very cool indeed. So everyone, we have with us Judi Miller, and she's the author of Perfect, and it's called Perfect, A Patch to Love, Forgiveness, and Transformation. And of course, you guys can find her book right here on the website, judymiller.net. You can also get it on Amazon, but I would suggest to get it on her website, because this is the reason we want to go to her website, because she is going to give us 5 free bonuses. So you want to go and order your copy there so you can get 5 extra free bonuses. And also while you're there, she's going to share with us, it's an Awaken the Creator Within, and that's also available. It's a free ebook. So you're able to get 5 bonuses and a free ebook. So you would be silly not to go to our website, which is judymiller.net, to receive these wonderful gifts. So I hope that you all will do that. Is there any last words that you'd like to share with our audience?
Cece, it was such a delight to be here, and I'm so honored to have the opportunity to speak with your audience.
It's great having you here. You guys, I'm going to put up her information. She is also on Facebook. You can find her on Judi Miller Author, and then also Instagram. Connect with her there, because everybody's getting on Instagram now. And of course, we have our Twitter, so you guys want to connect with her on Twitter there. So it's Judi DI_A Miller_Miller. And then on Instagram, it's Judi, JUDI.A.Miller. And then on the Facebook, just find her on Judi with an I, Miller Author, and you'll find her there. So that's great. And of course, we want to make sure we connect with her on her website. Again, it's Judi, JUDI.Miller.net. So thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so pleased to have you. And I hope that you'll join us again, because I really would love to have you maybe come to one of our other hosts, and maybe you could also talk with them a little bit further. Oh, and Johnny says he liked you. Thanks, Judi.
Oh, that's very kind.
That's very nice, but you weren't listening because it's Judi with an I.
I would love to see
you. I know he does the speaking in his phone, so that's where it came from. But anyhow, so no worries there. Just as long as you're listening, that's all we want. We appreciate it so much. We love that. Well, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back on. Maybe one of our other hosts would love to have you and get into this a little bit further. I think it would be a great thing to have. Oh, Jenny's with us. Hey, Jenny. Hi. How are you? Nice to see you here. She said, great show. She's been on our show a few times, and she's in the RV. She travels around the world, and
Wow.
around the U.S., I should say, and it's great to have her. So great. All right, you guys, we're going to have to wrap up the show. I hate to do it because we have such a wonderful guest here today. So thank you again, Judi Miller. We appreciate all that you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, guys, we're going to have to wrap it up. You guys are listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. We are the #1 internet singles talk network, and you guys make that happen for us, and we appreciate it and love you so for it. Again, I'm Cece Schatz. I am the doyenne of relationship building. Our website is goingsolomedia.com, and if you want to send me an email, you're welcome to at goingsolonetwork@gmail.com. I love to hear from you. We love everything. And so Jenny's saying, fabulous. Thank you so much. We love you. And we hope to have her back on again and hear more about her tales visiting some of the spots here in the United States. So, all right, guys, we're going to have to wrap it up. This is the Author Corner. Meet the author. We had a beautiful author on today. I hope you loved her book and what she had to say as much as I did. I think she's fabulous. We'll see you right back here, same time, same place. Bye.